The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Donald Trump will not be apologizing for his prior statements about the Central Park Five, as they are known. The Central Park Five are now in the spotlight again, I guess we could say, because there's a Netflix miniseries called When They See Us, which talks about the entire Central Park Five sort of fiasco and case. And Donald Trump was asked whether he would be apologizing to the five men who were falsely accused of a brutal rape, and which Donald Trump paid for an ad against in the, I believe it was New York Times back when it was going on, asked, will you apologize to them? Donald Trump said, why do you bring that question up now? It's an interesting time to bring it up. And then Trump said they admitted their guilt. If you look at Linda Fairstein and you look at some of the prosecutors, they think the city should never have settled that case, so we'll leave it at that. And what, of course, this is ignoring, Pat, is that we now know that the admissions conflicted with each other in a way that should have immediately called into question whether these were actual bona fide confessions or forced or inaccurate confessions. And it's such a cop-out to hear Donald Trump say that now.
Yeah, and we know that admissions can be coerced out of people, and it looks like that's what happened in the case of the Central Park Five. Also, there's DNA evidence pointing to the actual perpetrator, so it seems pretty open and shut. I think there's a couple things going on here. One, Trump hates having to admit that he's wrong. He often doesn't do that. He often doubles down. And also, I think the guy's just racist. I mean, 4 of the 5 members of the Central Park Five were black. The other one was Hispanic. Would he have made the same accusations against 5 white young men? Probably not. And would he stick to it, his story 20, 30 years later? I don't think so.
I completely agree with you. And, we have to be careful about saying people are racist when they're not. And then you always hear about calling someone racist is the worst thing you could do. You don't need to prove that Donald Trump proactively wants to hurt black people in order to understand that there are different treatments that would be expected on the basis of the race of the Central Park Five, races of the Central Park Five, versus if they were white. And the thing is, it's even bigger than Trump. Would the story even have been covered the same way? Would it have received the same amount and type of attention were the supposed perpetrators who gave conflicting confessions under duress and were ultimately exonerated by DNA evidence? The entire thing would be covered differently by the media apparatus if their races had been different. And this is why, when people say Trump can't be anti-Semitic because his daughter converted to Judaism and Jared Kushner's Jewish. There's 2 different things. Overt discrimination against and dislike of people on the basis of race or ethnicity are different than the way in which prejudices infect your views.
Yeah, and of course, people always say we don't know what's in his heart, and I guess that is true to some extent. It's a great cop-out, but there's plenty of evidence to show that he has at least embraced some racist tendencies, the Charlottesville comments, the fact that he got in trouble for housing discrimination when he was working with his father on real estate projects in the 1970s, the birtherism stuff. Like, if Barack Obama was a white man or just not black, would he have gone around the country claiming that the president was born in a different country and that we have to see his birth certificate? Probably not. He never did that for George Bush or Bill Clinton. So
that's exactly right.
I think that was totally racist on his part.
It's all tinged with, I don't really like doing this, but there's this concept of racialism and things being racialized. It's not necessarily overt racism, but at the same time, I worry about using those terms because it sometimes seems like you're saying, if you stop short of racism and just do racialism, it's like less bad. It's like, no, we're kind of talking about 2 different things, but it's really all the same thing. And listen, I think most of the bonus show audience kind of understands where we're coming from here. And of course, Donald Trump cannot admit that he's wrong about anything, so don't expect any kind of apology from him about the Central Park Five stuff. Domino's is going to start delivering pizzas via an autonomous robot this fall. This is happening in the same way that people write to me angrily still and say there will never be autonomous vehicles when they already exist. This is, again, a reality that is coming that a lot of people don't want to accept. But this is something that is starting in the fall. The robotics company Nuro, N-U-R-O, has been using electric self-driving vehicles to deliver groceries to Kroger customers in Phoenix and Houston. That's a grocery store. And now they are going to be using these vehicles, which look like giant sort of pill bugs on wheels and can go up to 25 miles an hour. They will be delivering Domino's pizzas to customers. And this is going to be limited to customers who place online orders only in Houston. And I think that this is absolutely fascinating, and I will still not be ordering Domino's pizza. And this is going to kill jobs eventually. And this is going to be a regulatory mess and all of that stuff that we talk about and Andrew Yang talks about. But it's happening, Pat. It's happening.
Well, it's pretty exciting stuff. First of all, I think that I have to disclose the fact that I used to be an employee of Domino's.
Please.
I don't want the bonus show audience to think that I have any sort of conflict of interest here, so I have to mention that off the bat. I remember Domino's started designing specially made cars for their drivers that included like a pizza warmer within the car. That was very nifty. Now they're moving on to this. Apparently these vehicles are about half the width of a normal sized car, much, much smaller. So maybe that'll allow it to get around traffic. And that's kind of cool. You can get your pizza in a quicker period of time. I think they can only reach up to 25 miles an hour, though. So maybe
like
not all too
25
quick.
miles an hour.
Yeah.
And ideally, Houston has this very specific highway layout, which I guess also, Pat, in combination with the narrower width, the narrower size, smaller width, narrower width. I don't know the right way to say that. I guess it's ideally suited for the highway and street layout of Houston.
But I still think that drone delivery would be much better. Now, we can't do drones for everything, right? Certainly big packages from Amazon, that's not going to work. Expensive stuff, maybe you don't want it to be flying around. But for something like a pizza that's only $10, $12, I don't think it's that risky. I would rather see drone delivery, and it can be much, much faster. That's the future,
I think that the big expensive packages are also going to be able to be delivered by drone eventually. But I think that the risk there is that these autonomous vehicles can't fall out of the sky and hit someone, whereas drones and the packages they are carrying conceivably could. But this is already working well where it's been tested. They've been testing it. Autonomous vehicle food delivery has been done on a couple of different college campuses, including George Mason University, back in January. And I think that this is absolutely fascinating. But still, this all is part of the coming reality that the relationship of humans to work is going to have to change. A lot of these jobs are going to be automated away. And if we don't, this is coming. And I'm not, Andrew Yang has now been talking about in 11 years, the autonomous technological unemployment will have completely reshaped the economy. I don't know about 11 years, but this is coming, and we've got to figure out what people are going to be doing and how they're going to be earning a living.
Yeah, and luckily, Papa John's, Domino's competitor, is on a downswing. So I think Domino's has taken up a big portion of that market that Papa John's left behind, and they have all this money now to spend on these new innovative ideas, like delivering it through autonomous cars.
Let's talk about what's going on with this pro-gun survivor of the Parkland, Florida shooting that took place, what was it now, a year and a half ago? That I never understand. February?
Yeah, February 2018, Valentine's Day 2018.
About a year and a half ago. His name is Kyle Kashuv, and he is one of the pro-gun survivors of the shooting. David Hogg, one of the sort of gun safety advocate survivors of the shooting, very different approaches to what should happen with firearms. Kyle Kashuv is now 18 years old. He was initially accepted to Harvard until it was revealed that he used racial slurs in texts, Skype conversations, and Google documents 2 years ago when he was 16 years old. And he, on May 23rd, the Huffington Post published messages that were written by him, which contained the N-word. It contained words, phrases like "kill all the effing Jews," although I thought maybe he was Jewish, which makes it sort of even weirder. And he defended himself on Twitter by saying the language was callous, the language was inflammatory. He was trying to be shocking and offensive and extreme, but that he was 16 years old. The shooting changed his perspective. He has now said he's embarrassed by the comments that he made. Harvard made the decision to rescind his acceptance or invitation to go to the school. And now this has completely exploded, and there is some disagreement on the right about this, and there is some disagreement on the left about this, interestingly enough. Not everybody is in agreement as to what should take place here.
Yeah, well, I think it's unfortunate, but I think Harvard is, well, within its rights, of course, to make that decision. I even think it's probably the right decision. That's because, you have to know that what you put online, what you put on social media can come back to bite you. And even if he's not racist, even if he just wanted to do this for shock humor, to impress his friends, what have you, you gotta be thinking a few steps ahead. And that's kind of the sort of mental ability that I think Harvard wants as a university, right?
Yes, that's true.
When I went,
but I don't know. I mean, here's my thought on this. He was 16 years old at the time, okay? How far does this go? Because I've talked before about this story where when I was 12 or 13, there was a kid I didn't like in middle school, and I told him that he had faggy hair. And I didn't know what his sexual orientation was, and it ended up blowing up into a whole thing. I never harbored any animus towards people on the basis of sexual orientation, as I still don't, but I didn't have the maturity at the time to realize that it's not even something that I should say. I've since apologized to that person, etc. Imagine that there was a recording of that, and it was used to get me kicked out of college or have an acceptance rescinded. 12, 13, even 16, I just don't know what we're saying. I mean, listen, I find this kid's politics deplorable. I'm not changing that. But I don't know how far this is supposed to go if things that kids do, maybe out of racial animus, maybe not, end up getting them into a position where now, listen, he'd be better off as an adult if he goes to Harvard. I would imagine that by going to Harvard, hopefully he would be in situations where his mind would be further opened and he would become more accepting of different types of people. I just don't know about this.
Well, it's not like he said these comments a long time ago. It was only a year and a half ago. And,
but he was 16.
Colleges, he was 16, of course. But when colleges are weighing whether or not to accept you into their university, they take a look at your track record, be it your grades, your extracurriculars, and the things that you say online, too. I was even told that. I went to high school from the years 2008 to 2012. And while, I wasn't in the Gen Z generation, I was in the millennial generation. Of course, we were aware of what social media is and how you can get yourself into trouble with it. And teachers instilled in us that we should make sure that we're careful about what we post online. This person, Kyle Kashuv, went to high school at a much later time than I did. And, the internet has become sort of a mainstay in our culture. I think he should know that if I knew that at a much younger age. But it's tough in a sense, too, because while I say that it's okay for Harvard not to accept him or to rescind his admission, am I saying that no school in the country should accept him? That's where I think it goes too far. Like, he should be able to go to college somewhere, but another university stepping up and saying that we'll accept you despite those comments that you made, why am I okay with that versus Harvard? That's when it gets weird for me personally.
I don't disagree. And I actually met Kyle Kashuv at Politicon, and he, it's like, he just struck me like a little kid. And I know that he's met with Trump and Melania and that he has a big following online, but he saw me just standing in between sessions and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I'm familiar with your program and I watch it and I like it," or whatever. And he was perfectly nice and respectful and whatever. And this is, by the way, not a defense or anything, but it's just like I think at the time he must have been 17. I saw a little kid who still just doesn't know a lot of stuff. And this is not a defense of what he said, but it's more, colleges have these policies. They're not often used. Sometimes they are, about saying we are rescinding admission because of what we have found in someone's past. I just question, what does society benefit or not from Kyle Kashuv now not going to a place he was accepted to based on things he already said were a mistake to have said? I just don't know. I don't know that we're better off as a society by rescinding his admission.
I suppose what's good for him in his specific case is that he's already a public figure, and so he can sort of leverage this. Like, he's been working with Turning Point USA for the past few years.
Which is a disgusting
I'm sure they're
group.
going to, led by Charlie Kirk. I'm sure they're going to love this story because they can make a point with him using this. So maybe in the end, he's going to be better off getting kicked out of Harvard or having his admission rescinded than he would have been having gone to Harvard. And at least for him, in his case, that's good news.
Maybe so. Yeah, I feel mixed about this, and I would love to hear from people in the audience about it. Let me know what you think about Harvard's decision, and we will follow up if there is strong reaction from our viewers.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.